Good. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. We're talking about the use of social media for higher ed, and it's kind of timely to talk about this as some of us were at Harvard conference last year, and there is a good discussion around how we can use social media for enhancing learning and teaching in our area. So the next presenter we have is Dr. Megan Teychenne. She's a senior lecturer in physical activity and health at the School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences at Deakin University. She's taught at tertiary level for nearly 10 years, and currently she is unit chair for two large cross-campus units, including both located and cloud campus teaching and learning. So these units are in the area of physical activity and health, and Megan's research within the Institute for Physical Activity and Nutrition at Deakin University focuses on the link between physical activity, sedentary behavior, and mental illness, with a key focus on targeting at-risk population groups, including women and socioeconomically disadvantaged adults. Her research interest is in the area has gained national and international recognition, and including informing the British Heart Foundation's evidence briefing on sedentary and behavior. And she's going to talk us about how she's actually using social media in her teaching practice. Over to you, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you. And just double checking you can hear me.
Great, we can hear you fine.
Excellent. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about tweeching, and I'm guessing most of you have probably been able to work out what my tweeching really means, and this is something that I came up with on the weekend. That is incorporating Twitter in teaching practice, and I'll talk through some of the things that I've done to incorporate Twitter in my higher ed teaching. So firstly, why have I looked at using Twitter? Well, back in 2013, the School of Exercise and Nutrition Science, where I'm based, we started a working party to develop a proposal as to how we can incorporate Twitter within our course to enhance student engagement. So we wrote up the proposal, we had guidelines on what this, why we would use Twitter and how we would use Twitter. And essentially we decided that, well, Twitter provides a really great opportunity to broadcast interesting information to students that's relevant to their profession, and also to help develop their digital literacy skills, which is a key graduate learning outcome here at Deakin University. So why would we use Twitter? Well, firstly, it's simple and it's free. It's a great way to rapidly communicate information, and short pieces of information at that. So we know a tweet allows up to 140 characters, which means that you've got to really convey a message very succinctly. It's really flexible. You know, you can use it to post about an announcement, your opinion about something. It can link to images, to journal articles, research findings, blogs, polls, etc. It's also a digital technology, so it's highly accessible. It can be accessed from PCs, iPads, smartphones. I don't need to go on. I'm sure you are all very aware. But this means that every student at Deakin University would be able to access Twitter. So what did we do? So the setting was a third year unit, which was embedded in the exercise sports science course. We had a number of health science students also within this unit. It was called Physical Activity and Population Health. The way the unit was set up is that we had a fortnightly lecture, or we called them classes, and that is because they were quite interactive. We flipped the classroom in this unit where students prepared, they had reading materials and questions to work through prior to coming to the lecture or the class, and then we would go through in a deeper detail about these the concepts that were spoken about in their pre-readings. So the aim of this unit, in a nutshell, is really to identify and critique the evidence that's related to the link between physical activity and different health outcomes. So what we first did, and Dr. Shannon Solquist, I should also acknowledge, was worked closely with myself, and we set up a physical activity and health Twitter handle, in which we then started tweeting out a couple of months before the unit was within trimester. So we started tweeting out about things related to physical activity and health, which would be of interest to students. And we started following some key researchers in this area. Then we helped, in the first class, we helped our students set up their own Twitter account. So we took students through, well, what Twitter is and why they would use Twitter, whether it's to share information, it also can be used to build professional profiles. We then moved into the ethical implications of this. So we, took students through the fact that what they post can be publicly accessible and potentially on the internet forever. So we needed to make that very clear. We took them through how they can set up their account to make it as private as possible. And then we took them through, well, what a tweet actually is and how to use Twitter. So we had a video that Susie McFarlane here at Deakin University made for us. It took us through, what a Twitter handle is, what the main body of a tweet is, and how we can link to other websites, for example. So once our students had set up their Twitter account, we got them to follow a number of interesting people to them, and these were just a few examples. So David Crawford's our head of school. We had myself and Shannon, as well as the Deakin Exercise and Sports Science Twitter handle. We also had, very importantly, the Physical Activity and Health Twitter handle that we had developed. So finally, how did we use Twitter? Firstly, in our first class, you can see we started to embed activities within the learning, teaching and learning. So in the first class, we see in teams, read the following article and compose a tweet that summarises the key findings. So here, students really had to be able to grasp the key findings of that literature and be able to then convey succinctly the key messages of that literature. In class 3, you can see that we gave students a scenario that they were working as a media advisor for Diabetes Queensland, and they needed to locate a recent article that provides evidence of the role of physical activity in sensory behaviour and that it plays in diabetes prevention, and then tweet about that. So here they were really drawing on, well, firstly being able to search and identify literature. They were then needed to interpret research, utilising critical thinking, and then communicating to a scientific or non-scientific audiences. So we'll try to show students that this is real world. There is a media advisor for Diabetes Queensland that needs to actually do these things. And students really engaged, and you can see here's a few screenshots that I just took off my phone, and I guess there's a prompt. Most students did use their phone for these activities. There were a few students that were on their laptops, but most used their smartphones linked up to the Wi-Fi at Deakin. You can see Kylie is tweeted to reduce risk of disease, increase your physical activity more than the current guidelines, and she's hashtagged HSE 316, and she's also put our Twitter handle in there. So it was really easy for us to see that tweet. You can see here, Kaya over on the right-hand side. Today I learnt that 1 to 2 sessions of resistance training per week helps to prevent hypertension with a hashtag HSE316. So we could see what students were actually taking in, what they were able to convey as well. So what was really neat about this activity also is that we got students to hashtag HSE316. So while they were compiling these tweets, I was able to put up on the screen, on the projector, their tweets, their live feed coming through at that moment. So they would share what they've learned, or they would share what they've read, and then we could easily discuss what they had found. So I could pick out a few really interesting tweets and talk about that, or hone in on specific concepts that somebody may have picked up. And students were really engaged in this, I think because they could see that it was live, it was real world. Another great Tweeching activity that I think it'd be neat for anyone that's teaching in higher ed to try is actually to show students a tweet and get them then to go and find the evidence behind that tweet to either support or refute a tweet. So this is one example. So should we be aiming for 15,000 steps per day rather than the widely recognised 10,000? Now this came about because there was some research last year about our physical activity guidelines actually being too low. We've got so much evidence behind these physical activity guidelines, but then there was a paper that came out and said that's actually not enough. We need to be doing 15,000 steps as opposed to 10,000. But what are the implications of that? We know that very few people actually meet the guidelines now. So to be able to be extending that target, is that going to be pushing it, and you know, the population then just give up on trying to meet them all together? So it was a really nice activity to get students to be thinking critically about this, and then, you know, using their digital literacy skills to go and find that evidence to support or refute. And then another use of Twitter is actually just communicating broad information to students. So if we have a look here, a timely article in light of our HSE 212 week 6 seminar, you can see The Age had an article that came about bicycle lanes and how dangerous they can potentially be, particularly in Melbourne. And that week we actually had a seminar based around the bicycle hire scheme in Melbourne, and, you know, what are some of the problems with it and what are some of the great things about it. So we could again be bringing students back into the real world so that what they're learning in class they can see is transferable to the real world. I think sometimes they can get a little bit bogged down in what they're learning in class and forget that it actually relates to what's going out in the real world. Another one was hashtag HSE316 students. What are the implications of this article? And as you can see, it was an article kind of based around the what I was just speaking about the exercise recommendations potentially being too low. And then over on the right-hand side, we can see my HC 203 students. So this was a different unit. This was exercise behaviour. And students were learning about really how to interpret research for the very first time. So learning about limitations of research and knowing that not everything you read is going to be of high quality. So this was a great article to kind of point them in that direction. Again, taking them out of being in the classroom and showing them that this stuff's happening out in the real world. So anecdotally, what I found was most students didn't use Twitter prior to beginning our unit. So I had about 80 students in my lectures or classes, and I think there may have been 4 or 5 that currently had a Twitter account, and that's not to say they were actually using it at that time. So we had a lot of uptake to use Twitter. There were a couple of students who were a little bit reluctant at the beginning, and they came to me at the start of that class and they said, you know, I don't know if I really feel comfortable using Twitter. And I took them through how we can, you know, beef up their security settings and whatnot, and, you know, they wouldn't have to put a photo or anything like that. But I also gave them the option, and I said, look, if you really feel strongly that you don't want to use it, that's fine. You can write your tweets on a piece of paper and then just hand it to me in class. And by the next week, both students had jumped on the Twitter bandwagon. And at the end of the trimester, one of them actually said, yeah, I was really reluctant at the start, but I'm glad I got on it because I can see what the use is. And I also gave them a few examples from my own experience with Twitter, and that is, you know, I've been able to link up with researchers via Twitter and actually started collaborating with researchers because of Twitter, we were retweeting the same stuff. We started following each other, and now we've got papers together and grants together, etc. So it really is quite a useful tool. Most students were really happy to give it a go, and yeah, as I said, by the end of trimester, nearly all students used it. So across the 3 campuses, Geelong, Melbourne and Warrnambool, we had about 100 users. There was one assessment that was based around tweets, so we actually got students to write a tweet about a particular article, again, you know, talking about the key findings of that article. And these were very low-stake assessments, and we were told we weren't allowed to get to assess students using Twitter as such, so they actually had to compile that tweet and then in like an online quiz scenario and put that together, and then we're able to assess them on their interpretation of findings as well as their communication skills. But we also encouraged them, if they wanted, to tweet that information out. And some students are still tweeting to this day, so we still follow a number of the students on the Deakin Physical Activity and Health Twitter feed, and a number of students are tweeting about research, or they're tweeting about, you know, their businesses. Some of them have set up exercise businesses, PTs, etc. And so it's quite interesting to see them now going out into the real world and still using Twitter. So that's it from me. As you can see, I used to quite often finish my classes or lectures by asking students to tweet out what they learned in today's seminar or class. So feel free to do that. My Twitter handle is here at Megan Teychenne, and I would love to see some tweets. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Megan. It's really wonderful to hear the authentic examples of how successfully tweeting is happening in your practice. If everyone could join me in thanking Megan for her presentation, that would be really great. And given the time, we only have a couple minutes left, so let's go to a couple of questions if you have any for all speakers, and hopefully we can capture some of the discussion here. If you have any questions, raise your hand or take your microphone.
After you, Kate.
Sorry, Colin. I posted one earlier in relation to Julie's. Just that I guess your research was confined to Facebook only this time around. Are there plans to kind of look at other social media like Twitter? Particularly, I guess, based on Megan's findings?
Yes, thank you. That was a great question, Kate. Yes, we had to, for the purposes of narrowing research focus, we had to just look at one, so I chose Facebook in that instance. But we would love to further use the model and have other people look at the model and use it in their own research, not just particularly for social networks such as, you know, Facebook, but for other forms of social media as well, to see if the model applies there as well. So great question, thank you. I hope I've answered it.
Very good. Thank you, Kate and Julie, for that. Colin, did you have another question?
I was actually trying to think of questions, and then basically Megan sort of answered all of the questions I had on the last slide. So I see Oriel's got a hand up.
I was forward thinking, and I thought, what are people going to ask me? So I did pop them down.
That's great. Let's go to Oriel, who's got hand up. Oriel?
Yeah, it's really for all 3 presenters, really. When I did a bit of research a while ago about students who were using Facebook, and they had set up their own little space that was private, and they were kind of using it for themselves, and they were using WeChat a bit as well to kind of support each other at the time. But there was a bit of resistance here amongst staff about, why are they doing that? We don't know what they're doing. We don't know how to use Twitter. We don't know how to use Facebook. Why are the students doing it? Have you struck a bit of resistance amongst other staff with using these new technologies?
I can start, and I'm sure others will be able to chime in. Here at Deakin, in the School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences, we were really lucky that our head of school really was encouraging this. So he got Susie McFarlane on board, and she was there as a support in terms of enhancing our digital literacy, knowing that this was a key area and a key focus of Deakin University as well. So she spent a lot of time with us. We undertook a lot of professional development to increase our digital literacy skills, because yes, there were certainly lecturers at the beginning that went, well, this is too hard basket, I don't really want to go there. But by the end of the PDs, and I think it was probably over about a 2 or 3 month period of her really enhancing it, particularly getting us onto Twitter and LinkedIn and these kinds of things, most people were fairly comfortable with using it. I can see that there's a number of lecturers and researchers that have really jumped on the Twitter bandwagon, but I can't really speak for other social media realms.
That's great. Just in the interest of time, John, do you have a question that maybe we'll take that as the last one and we'll finish up?
Yeah, mine was for Megan. It's just in relation to the accessible component of the Twitter and the percentage of it. And although there was high uptake, what did you find of did you find anyone did it just because it was accessible, or?
Yeah, so firstly, we had, they were worth 5%, but that was only even a small component of that 5% task. So it was probably worth about 1% per tweet each fortnight. So all up, probably 6%. And your second part of your question was, were students just using it?
Yeah, the quality, yeah.
Yeah, and I could definitely see that as well. So there were some students that kept using it throughout, and there were other students that would, once a fortnight they would jump on and they would tweet, but then that would be all they did. So there was definitely a mixed bag.
Yeah. And have you carried it through to your other subjects?
Not to the other subjects yet. We have kept it now with HSC 316. This will be the third or fourth year. I'm just trying to think. It's 2017. So this will be the fourth year that we will have implemented it. We're just about to go into trimester now and introduce them to it next week, in fact. So it'll be interesting to see if the cohorts, if they change a little bit, or if we do see similar uptake again.
Absolutely. I think it's fantastic, all the social media use actually. So well done, guys.
Great. Thank you very much. I think that's us to wrap up the session then. I'd like to thank all of the three presenters for presenting today. I think it was really good to have a framework to think about and hear from perspective from China and how it's actually done in practice in a large classroom. So thank you all very much. And thank you also for the participants tuning in. And this webinar has been recorded, so if you'd like to revisit or share this webinar, we will share the link later on. Thank you very much.